Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about the Pulitzer Prize winning great American novel that is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now, this has been in contention for one of the greatest books ever written by an American author. It is on the best of list of a lot of authors I really respect, like Stephen King or Brian Lee Durfee. I mean, this has to have the highest critical acclaim out of anything that I have ever read, period. So that's what really drove me to this, because I am not a Western reader. I'm not even really a big Western fan, but the reputation this book had made me feel like I would be a fool not to at least give it a try. Now, I can say confidently that this book is probably objectively one of the best books I've ever read, period. Now, there's some things that I didn't care for just based on personal taste, but if I really step back, I understand fully why there's a bunch of awards slapped on the front of this book. Now, right off the bat, I just want to say McMurtry is an amazing storyteller and a great character writer, and this book is very easy to read, which is important. It's a 1,000-page huge tome. You know, the barrier to entry has to be low for people to be interested and to make it through that. And one thing that makes it special is the amount of nuance that he sprinkles through this that really pushes it over the edge and makes it this true classic and masterpiece, and what really redefined the genre of American fiction and also of Westerns when this came out. So, what are some of the things he does that's so incredible? Why is this an important book? Well, the first thing is it shows in a transitional period of American history. This takes place in the 1870s, and it kind of destroys this romanticized image that we have with the Wild West in that time frame, and shows that this is a brutal world, or, you know, it's our world, but this period of American history is, you know, death is a constant reality. There's a lack of compassion. This is a hardened, grim world overall. And, you know, this is not the first book that has really tackled that topic. Another one that's very popular, it's often compared to this, is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. But Blood Meridian really just focuses on that brutality exclusively, and it tries to keep the reader at arm's length just by means of its writing style. But Lonesome Dove is instead a very intimate and more accessible reading experience, and McMurtry's just general storytelling and the way that he makes you fall in love with these characters, in my opinion, just makes it the better read overall. If you could only read one, this is the one I would go with, hands down. So another thing that he does here is he completely dispels and breaks apart the archetype of the cowboy. Reality was not some young gunslinger going out with this call to adventure, you know, where he gets the girl and saves the town with the quick draw saloon, you know, fight that we see in every John Wayne movie or Hondo, or just what we associate with Westerns and cowboys. That was not reality. He shows a huge spectrum through a really big cast, because this is a large cast, multiple POV story. And he shows this wide spectrum of who they are, how they were influenced, what influences them, the emotions that they had, the heartaches that they had, not just through the world, but through other people around them. You know, truly amazing stuff. And one thing he does that really is a tool to break apart these men is the women in the society. And there's three primary female characters. One is a prostitute. The second one is a disgruntled homemaker who was forced to be a wife and a mother and wants to flee. The third is an incredibly ambitious intellectual type. And the way that the men in this society have this blind obedience and infatuation with these women is a huge tool for McMurtry to really tear apart their characters in a good way that makes you, you know, be invested in them, but in the other side to kind of dispel all of the preconceived notions that you have on what a cowboy is. It's just so well done. I mean, what a masterpiece this book is. Absolutely incredible things. So just quickly, what is the story about? You know, I want to keep this generally spoil free, but like I said before, it's a large POV cast, but you do have two primary protagonists. One is a man named Gus and one is a man named Call. Now, they are retired Texas Rangers, and in their youth, they were involved with kind of settling the American Southwest, specifically on the Texas-Mexican border. And at that time frame, there was a lot of war and scalping gangs, and they were driving out Native Americans from that area. And they've kind of settled, they're about 50, 60 years old at this point, and they've opened a small cattle company in the town called Lonesome Dove in southern Texas. And immediately, this is going to be a different kind of story, because it's like you're walking into it as the adventure's already over. At least the adventure that we're used to seeing in Westerns is done. It's completed. So these two guys running the small cattle company have a very unique personalities, and they really use to as a personification of this transition that's going on in the U.S. at that time frame, specifically in the West. So you have Call, who is really trying to revert to the past, and he's very stubborn. He's a workaholic, and he just wants to be constantly pushed into this brutal action-filled kind of world. He'll stand at night just on his horse waiting for something to happen that just is never going to happen, or this violence that's never going to come, but he's just prepared. And then you have Gus, on the other hand, who is showing this kind of stabilization, and he's willing to accept this future domesticated life of the U.S. that we know is soon to come, and he is taking it with open arms, and he is just a funny guy overall, incredibly witty, but they're both quite stubborn, and they play off of each other very, very well. Now, Gus's personality is crucial for this story, because he introduces all of the levity that makes this book feel not so weighty. He is very well written, and out of all the characters, he was the one that I wanted to spend the most page time with. Just for his quick wit, and he has kind of those old, my granddad used to tell me this kind of sayings. He was great for that. Now, both Gus and Cole have an old Texas Ranger buddy named Jake Spoon, who comes to the town of Lonesome Dove kind of out of nowhere. He's on the run for committing a murder, and he plants a seed in their head that they should do a cattle drive from southern Texas to Montana, basically with the promise that it's unsettled territory, and if they get there, they're able to make a lot of money. Now, there's some kind of mixed feelings about this amongst the cattle company, but ultimately they go on this quest, and that's what the majority of the story is. It's a quest, and a ton of stuff happens, and chaos ensues throughout their 3,000-mile trek, which I'm going to just leave spoiler-free. I want you to enjoy it for yourself, because it is worth taking the journey with these guys. Now, there are other plot points happening simultaneously. You have a guy that's after Jake for his murder, and he's trying to find his wife that fled, a whole bunch of stuff. And it really, it just adds a dynamic that I'm not used to seeing in a lot of historical fiction, that I'm more used to seeing in something like a fantasy epic, which it made me feel right at home overall. And if you're somebody who's used to that kind of speculative fiction format with multiple POV characters, you will like this as well. So I'm going to leave it just as that. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk about today is to just hopefully convince you to pick this book up, because it truly is something special, and you don't have to be a Western fan at all. This is just a great piece of fiction. It is an epic. It is classic. It's worth your time. And if there isn't even a small amount of you that's interested, just take the plunge, buy the book. You will not regret it. If you do, or you have read it, let me know your thoughts. This is something that I'd like to do, maybe a spoiler discussion on, like a full deep dive, because there's a lot in this book that's really interesting that I think is worth talking about. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And until next time, see ya.